Hello, everyone. Thank y'all so much for joining. Super excited that y'all are here. And in usual Black Men Radical style, please feel free to share your name, your pronouns, and where you are based in the chat. We just love to shout folks out. So we're going to get started in a few moments as we wait for more folks to come into the event. Maroon Archives, Cartographies of Freedom. And we have a super dope and stellar lineup. This amazing collab with Kinfolk Tech and Black Men Radical. So thank y'all so much for joining. Hi, Andrea, based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Thank you for being here with us. Hi, Cameron. Okay. STL. I'm Solana. Hi, Solana from Gainesville, Florida. Really happy you're here too. Thank y'all. Sydney from Raleigh, North Carolina. I see Dallas, Texas. Okay. Okay. I know I was on the session topic. Yes. From LA, Toronto. Thank y'all so much for being here. Oakland. Hi. Oh, hi, Siddisse and Raven from Jordan. That's so sweet. Hi, Sazizo from Nottingham, UK. Thank you. Hey, Helena from Brazil. Thank y'all so much. I see someone from West Philly. Go ahead, Christian. All right, y'all. We're just going to wait a few more moments to let folks come in. Hi, Byron from Virginia. This is really sweet. Thank y'all. Hi, from Canada, Austria. Thank y'all for joining. I see a lot of Philly folks. Okay, yes, yes. Okay. The city of brotherly love. Okay, give me a cheesesteak. Hey, said from Salvador, Bahia, Brazil. Okay. All right. Well, we're going to get started because I love starting on time. I don't want to be on CP time. Okay. So welcome everyone. My name is Jamie Swift, and I'm the founder and executive director of Black Men Radicals. And if you're not familiar with us, we are a Black feminist advocacy organization dedicated to uplifting and centering Black feminist activism around the world. Super excited today because, as Raven will tell you later on, BWR and Kinfolk Tech have been scheming and dreaming and imagining and doing all these things for this amazing collab for a long time, right? And so we're super excited to present to you today the first panel out of a two-part panel, Maroon Archives, Cartographies of Freedom. We have a stellar lineup. I'm actually like surprised some of y'all say yes, because I was like, okay, this is beautiful, right? And this panel is actually a part of Black Men Radicals, our School for Black Feminist Politics, teaching on Black feminist Marronage, and Kinfolk Tech's project on Dreaming with the Archives. So before I introduce our panel, our amazing esteemed panelists, I wanted to pass it off to Raven, Ruff, and Felice from Kinfolk Tech to talk more about the Dreaming with the Archives project.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Jamie. And yeah, I just want to echo what you said. I'm just so excited about this lineup of folks. When we dreamed up this series, this panel, like just top tier. So just the fact that y'all are here and are willing to hold space for this conversation is just so exciting. As it was said, I'm Raven Ruffin Felice, pronoun she, they. I'm Director of Strategic Partnerships at Kinfolk Tech. We are a nonprofit organization that brings place-based stories to light. We weave together art, collective storytelling, and technology to create immersive narratives that reshape history, connect generations, and open new pathways to imagining the future. And as Jamie mentioned, this program for us is part of our Dreaming with the Archives initiative, which is a multi-city initiative that we launched on Juneteenth, 2025, to harness emerging technology and imagination for cultural preservation and social justice. And so through this initiative, we've been hosting location-based community workshops, film screenings, and critical conversations like this while creating digital monuments that carry our shared histories forward and reimagine public spaces for new futures. And so we're just so excited along with this panel that we were able to also honor the legacy of Nanny Helen Burroughs, in collaboration with Jamie to create an augmented reality monument in her honor. And so in alignment with Maroon Archives, we're excited to showcase that. So if you stick around during the Q&A, you'll get an opportunity to see what Jamie and the Black Women Radicals created. So thank you. Thank you all for being here, and I'll pass it back to you, Jamie.
Thank you, Raven. And I also wanted to shout out Dave, Mike, Micah, Asia, Dele, Layla, so many folks from the Kinfolk Tech team. Nanny Helen Burroughs actually was the founder of the first school for Black women and girls in the US, right? And so this is a part of Black Women Radicals fundraiser to open up a physical location for the School for Black Feminist Politics in DC. So these ancestral and feminist Marronage connections to Nanny Helen Burroughs and inspired by her leadership. All right, y'all, we are about to get into reading these amazing bios from our amazing panelists. Now, I can't read everybody's bio, all their full bio because our panelists are so esteemed, but I just am really super excited about this lineup. People who I've worked with before, but people have always wanted to work with. So this is a dream come true. So first, our first panelist is Dr. Aleia Brown, who is a scholar of Black women's history and modern contemporary African American history. Her work also unfolds over the following research areas: material culture, critical museum studies, Black digital humanities, and Black radicalisms. Disrupting the loop of recovery, Black women craft, and political thought, her current manuscript project narratizes and analyzes the emergence of Black women-led cooperatives in the Alabama Black Belt and the Mississippi Delta to build power and autonomy in the 1960s. So thank you so much, Dr. Brown, for being here. Jatavia Gary is a filmmaker and multidisciplinary artist working across documentary, avant-garde video art, sculpture, and installation. Gary seeks to trouble notions of objectivity and neutrality in nonfiction storytelling by asserting a Black feminist subjectivity and employs a rigorous interrogation and apprehension of the archive in much of her multimodal work. Previous films have received awards at Ann Arbor Film Festival, Black Star Film Festival, New Orleans Film Festival, and Locarno Film Festival, among others. So thank you so much, Jatavia, for being here. Next up, we have Nadege Green, who is a journalist and community historian based in Miami. Her work centers the lived experiences of Black people in South Florida. Green's practice and approach to storytelling is deeply rooted in history and first-person narratives that explore and connect issues around race, culture, climate justice, and displacement. Green is the founder of Black Miami-Dade, a history and storytelling platform that resists the erasure of Miami's Black past. Thank you, Nadege, for being here, and good to see you. It's good seeing you again. Siddisse Negero is a first-gen Ethiopian-American creative researcher, writer, and self-taught archivist born and raised in the DC metro area, currently based in Philadelphia. She is a graduate of the Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies program at the University of Maryland College Park with an emphasis in Black queer studies. They are co-founder of Kai Kai Archives, digital archival resource focused on collecting the histories of Black, lesbian, queer, gender nonconforming, and trans people. So thank y'all so much for being here and for our esteemed panel. And also, if something resonates with you, please share in the chat and follow us and tag us on Black Women Radicals, or IG, and also Kinfolk Tech. So the first question I have for everyone is, the physical geographies and symbolism of Marronage and the Maroon are important blueprints of Black fugitivity, flight, freedom, and futures. Throughout history, historical Black women leaders of Maroon, such as Dondara dos Palmares, Teresa G. Benguela, and Queen Nanny of the Maroons, were key figures in constructing, building, and envisioning Black New Worlds and modalities of liberation. With this, how do you see yourselves and your artistic, archival, and political practices as a part of a grand arc, legacy, and cartography of Black feminist freedom, resistance, and survival? And y'all can just jump in. Don't be scared. Okay. We having a conversation. All right. I'm so excited. I'm about to take notes, y'all. Y'all should be taking notes too. Okay. Okay.
I'm gonna jump in
Yeah.
because I just want to name that geographically, I live in a Black Maroon site, right? Florida, though not well known for or amplified around its Black Marronage, is that site, right? Most people know about the Underground Railroad that goes north, but there was also one that went south. There was one that went southwest. And so modern day Miami, where I live, is the site of the Saltwater Underground Railroad, right? Which went south to the Bahamas. And so before Florida even becomes part of the United States, when it was La Florida, it was the site of the Salt Underground Railroad. And so I think geographically being in a space that is quite literally a site of Black Marronage, of stealing ourselves back, that there is a mandate for Black folks here, right, to create and to exist in that legacy. And a big part of the work that I do is just stealing ourselves back, right? I think it is vital that even before the attacks that we're experiencing right now, that we steal ourselves back from institutional archives, that we steal ourselves back from paywalls, that we democratize this information because it's ours. And so my practice with Black Miami-Dade as the founder of a history and creative studio based in Miami, but also as a creative and an independent scholar and writer, has always been to make sure that the information that belongs to us is returned to us. And I will stop there.
Why'd you stop? You could have kept going.
I
Okay.
mean, because it's a few of us, so
It's
I'm
a
not gonna
few of
take much space because I want to keep the conversation going. But that is just where I stand. I think just being in a space that quite literally is a space of stealing ourselves back, and being an independent scholar who dates institutions but makes my own thing. I think, anytime I get access to JSTOR, I'm like, free this. Cite the work, but liberate it, right? Because I don't think the only people who should have access to the deeper interiors of our histories are folks with .edu emails.
Exactly.
Though I will borrow your .edu email.
Thank you so much, Nadege. I'm interested and curious about what other folks have to say about this question.
I'll jump in. But first, thank you, Jamie, and thank you, Raven. This is an incredible experience and something that I think we need. We need to be talking amongst ourselves about history, memory, and sharing information. So I'm really glad that you all have set up this space for that. Um, I approach the archive in two different ways. First, as a public historian and curator. And really, in that function, I'm a memory keeper, but also really trying to remind us of what we already know. Like, really showing us what is deep down inside, what we know to be true about radical histories, but has somehow been removed from us. So that's always the kind of guiding light of the work that I do, is reminding us of the radical histories that have been threatened to be erased or removed or inaccessible. Um, and then in addition to that, I'm also a historian, I'm an academic, but my focus is the boundless archive. So locating the archive that isn't solely in the institution, but in basements, in craft, in so many other places. And in that way, I think about continuing um, Marronage communities, because they were in the hinterlands, like they were in autonomous places. So that is where I look for the histories. That's where I look for the sources. Where is the boundless archive? That's the question that I'm always asking. And then I'm always practicing on tuning my ear um, to hear the abolitionist histories, and tuning my vision to see abolitionist histories, which is a very different skill set, right, than what we learn in graduate school, but that's something that has been part of my journey of understanding Black women's radical histories.
Thank you much for sharing, Aleia. I really do appreciate that. Anyone else?
I can jump in. Yeah, first I want to, of course, thank Jamie and Black Women Radicals and Raven and Kinfolk Tech, and also just want to express how lucky I feel to be on a panel of such brilliant people. And yeah, so kind of when I think of archival and memory work, especially the memory work of those of us at high levels of threat, I really think of it as reparative work. I think of it as like soul repairing work. And this is how I think of the legacy of Black and women of color feminist writers, that and what they laid out in their writing, really creating pathways to something deeper, internal, and spiritual. I think of June Jordan, M. Jackie Alexander, Glorianne Zaldua, Audre Lorde, those whose canon really transformed forthcoming generations, which I absolutely feel am a part of and have been changed by. And it, to me, feels like that work inches us closer to, as Audre Lorde references and uses of the erotic, our most profound and our most profoundly creative source. So they use the pen, as many do, to open up that pathway. And I think in my work, in creating an accessible resource for Black, queer, and trans people to imagine, witness, and create, as Kiki Archive seeks to do, it hopefully creates another pathway. And that pathway can be to inspire a continuation of these legacies, and those legacies being global feminist legacies of resistance, and that resistance being in the refusal to become small, the refusal to cease to exist, and the refusal to become somebody else. So that's kind of, yeah, how I see this as a part of the legacy. Thank you again.
Thank y'all. There's so much that's been said that feels so resonant. And thank you to the organizers and to everyone who's in the room with us. And please bear with me. I'm actually recovering from COVID. This is like week 2 for me. Don't feel bad. I'm yet holding on, as the old folks say. But wear your mask. I was wearing mine, but nobody else was. But I'm here and I'm grateful to be here. And this feels a little bit like a fever dream. But I'm grateful. I think this notion of stealing yourself away is there were 2 things that were said by 2 different people. Stealing yourself back and reparative gestures. These are almost always kind of percolating at the forefront of my mind when I'm making something. And as Jamie already mentioned, much of the work is like almost saturated with archive. I'm just kind of like pilfering and attempting to recontextualize for the purpose of expanding our perceptive capabilities, right? I feel like we're talking about stealing ourselves away, and we have to consider what has been done to our minds, right? And how we can reapprehend the very, essence of who we are, aside from our souls, this thinking thing up here. And I think when we're being faced with what we're being faced with now, which is what we've been faced with for thousands of years, we really have to consider how we are going to think ourselves out of this thing. And for me, that comes with vision, creative vision. The question mentions like a kind of political resistance or these kind of modalities of liberation. And I want us to always remember that creativity and imagination, our ability to envision something else for ourselves, is absolutely paramount. And I think that stands at the foundation of what I'm always attempting to do when I sit down to try to make something, or when I sit down to even begin to think about what I'm going to make. It's like, how am I going to help whoever sees this? How am I going to galvanize them to think about our reality differently? how am I going to kind of push them and push myself to think beyond what I'm in right now towards what I actually want. So prefiguring something that may not already exist. And that to me has always been the role of the artist. And so that is what we are attempting to do all the time, right? When we make our work. So that's kind of where I'm at with this thing.
Listen, I see people in the comments talking about they've been taking notes. Like it's the study session has already commenced. And I really thank y'all so much for this, because this is a treat for me, because so much of my work focus is on Black feminist abscondents in the Americas. And so it's to hear these your responses speak so much to not only the historical, but the contemporary and what about our future. And so Jatavi, when you were talking about, um, you know, what has been done to the mind, I keep harkening back to Toni Morrison in Song of Solomon and how flight, and talking about Milkman, and how she's like, in an interview, it wasn't just about the physical escape, but what happened with the mind. And so I'm thinking about this too, as we are in such perilous times, and also looking to our ancestors who navigated and used flight and abscondence to build a different world. And so thank y'all so, so much. Someone wrote, genuinely broke out the pen and paper as soon as I started, period. Bring out that pen and paper, okay? So the next question is about the Kilombo. So Black Brazilian feminist theorist Beatriz Nascimento argued that the process of the Maroon Kilombo was not only about flight or fleeing from slavery to freedom, but it was, she argued that enslaved Africans who mapped their pathways, ocean waves, and riverways to freedom should be viewed as political and military and spiritual theorists and tacticians. I would like to use Nascimento's conceptualization of the Kilombo here to ask you individually about your work as artists, archivists, and activists, and how iterations and interventions of Black feminist maroon strategies, theories, and practices exist and manifest in your work. So, Dr. Brown, your work once again examines the archives of Black women textile artists in the Alabama Black Belt in the Mississippi Delta during the 1960s, and the emergence of Black women-led craft cooperatives as a form of resistance against dispossession and erasure. Can you speak more to how Black women textile artists mapped their autonomy and freedom during this time? And how does their activism serve as a radical example of the possibilities of community and counter archives?
Yeah, so my work, on one hand, is a history, a civil rights history, because it is taking place during the civil rights movement. A lot of the textile workers or crafters that I write about, they participated in marches and even got blacklisted for marching. And that that blacklisting in 1960 forced them to think about the regimes that they were under in very different ways. They understood the regime of Jim Crow, and also understanding sharecropping and the limitations of what happens to the mind. Like I've came across some of the letters that they wrote where the sharecropper wouldn't even let them sow. So they were interested in, how do we find a formation that is very different than the one that we live under, where we can work and also express our politics and create something new, not solely just for like as an artistic practice, but also as a social practice. So I argue that there's a connection between the crafts that they were making, as well as them practicing really an autonomous formation. So Jatavia, I think you mentioned prefigurative politics. They were actually living a prefigurative politic by starting these cooperatives. And they started, there's some in Mississippi, some in Alabama, some worked with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, they worked with SNCC and the Poor People's Corporation, they worked with the Southern Federation of Cooperatives. But all of that, they had this incredible vision of not only having their own cooperatives, but actually having an entire network, a solidarity economy, of one where the United States was operating under a different race and class system. So I think I'm just astounded when I look at their vision and look at what they faced, because some of their cooperatives were burnt down, some of their cooperatives, their materials were stolen, but they still had the vision to create these cooperatives. And I also call this an ephemeral history. Not many of the cooperatives lasted beyond 10 years. But what you see when you look in the archive is that they fully committed to it. They fully committed to understanding their liberation and living it out. And I, I guess the connection between them and the Kilombo, I think a lot about geography and cartography. These women were outside the hinterlands, right? They were even beyond the country, beyond the urban center. So any type of change, or even like the civil rights acts that were passed, they did not apply to them because the social order hadn't changed yet. So they were truly choosing to live in a way that was beyond what even the law said. So that's a truly inspiring story, and it's a history that I don't want us to forget.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brown. Your work is so fascinating to me. I cannot wait to get your book and to also have you sign it. Okay, I'm gonna use my little privilege for that. Okay. Um, Jatavia, your artistic practices explore Black spiritual technologies and ancestral legacies that center Black feminist subjectivities. As a self-described daughter of two waters, your work reminds me of Toni Morrison when, during her speech at the New York Public Library in 1986, stated, "You know, they straighten out the Mississippi River in places to make room for houses and livable acreage. Occasionally, the river floods these places. Floods is the word they use, but in fact, it is not flooding, it is remembering. Remembering where it used to be. All water has a perfect memory and is forever trying to get back to where it was. Writers are like that, remembering where we were, what valley we ran through, what the banks were like, the light that was there, and the route back to our original place." So with this, how do Black women in spiritual intimacies push and pull you to remembrance and rememory to our original place? In what ways do Black women in the divine serve as spiritual and archival strategies and tactics in your work? Sorry for the long question, y'all. I had to do y'all justice.
That's such a great question. Actually, I mean, I won't say that I'm stumped, but I am challenged. I have to say, I'm a daughter of two waters, that it's not self-described. Someone said that. It's a distinction, and a responsibility. For me, I think, I really believe remembering is more difficult, right, than forgetting. You feel me? Like, and forgive me if someone has said this before, but there are things in my life that I absolutely have forgotten. And it's my brain protecting me, right? My brain is saying, no, you don't need to know that right now. But I understand at some point I'll probably remember it, and I'll have to remember it for a reason, right? I'll have to remember it because therein lies the lesson, therein lies the kernel of truth, therein lies the essence of probably why I'm even here on this earth. So for me, a lot of what I've been focused on right now has been a spiritual practice that is it's completely oral, it's not written down, and it's thousands of years old. It predates Christianity. And this has been the thing that has been keeping me afloat. This has been the thing that has been keeping me sane, allowing me to wake up in the morning and do my work and to face myself in the mirror and to be a good friend and to be a good daughter and to be a good human being, right? And to remember who I am, because, I am often quite terrified, if you want the truth, of what's going on around me, but also what's going on inside of me, right? There's so many different changes that's happening within the world, and I feel like it's triggering so many different changes in my relationships and who I am as a human being. And forgive me for getting too personal, but I just feel like, hey, we're all here. Let's, let's have a conversation. And I think, there's this long legacy of Black women who I look to, whether they are my spiritual family or my natal family or my creative ancestors. I have a few North Stars that kind of pull me back, right? If I'm getting off task or I'm wandering a little bit, or maybe I feel a little down, there are these North Stars that bring me back, and they remind me of why I am here. They remind me that there is yet work to do. They remind me that I need to say the thing that I am fearful of saying. And they remind me that I need to stay on my dean, to continue to do the work that I'm supposed to do. So I think a lot about the future, which is what I discussed in the first answer to your question. And sometimes, I'm not going to lie, I'm really quite nihilistic about the future, right? This is where the prayer and the meditation and the ritual comes in, so that I can be hopeful and have faith despite what I am seeing. So, those women remind me, that tradition reminds me that it's not just me, my little old Black self, right? There's this long line of people that come before me, and there will be this long line of people that come after me. And what am I going to leave for them? What am I going to say to them? And what are they going to then have to remember once I am gone, once this iteration of the world is gone and something new emerges? So, it helps to keep me from feeling so small, but also so big, right? To the point where I'm not out of alignment. I don't know if I'm answering your question or not, but I'm just really trying to stay focused on what's happening internally, so that I can show up for the collective in the appropriate and necessarily helpful ways. And the work is partially that, but I'm feeling more now that a lot of that is a kind of spiritual responsibility. The spiritual responsibility harkens and beckons us to behave a certain way. And I'm not talking about Christianity, of course. The spirit, and no shade to the Christians. I come from evangelicals in Texas, but I also come from root working, what would be called witches in Arkansas, right? So it's really about remembering a lot of these legacies and pulling them in, right? Like Aleia is talking about the cooperatives of care and craft from the past. How can we take that information and implement that now, right? What sort of collectives and cooperatives will we have to lean on, right? Because what she's mentioning is a very anarchic response to the state. The state will let you down time and time again. We're seeing it nonstop. So how can we remember and take the things that have happened from the past and begin to implement it now and fill in the holes and meet the needs of the people? So that's kind of what I'm thinking about right now. Again, don't know it at all if it's speaking to the question, but hopefully it will speak to somebody's heart.
No, you definitely answered the question and then some. And Dr. Brown did the same thing too. And y'all's responses remind me also of Beatriz Nascimento's conceptualization of the Kilombo, not as only a geographic space, but like who we are and where we stand. Like we are the Kilombo. And so to your point, what is the remembering processes of what was done then and how do we apply it to now? Because we have the answers. They gave us the notes. But it's like, how are we going to remember, and what are the consequences of remembering? So thank you. And I see that a lot in all y'all's work about recovery, but also the costs, the mental and emotional and spiritual costs of recovery, of remembering, of forgetting or not being able to get back to a certain place. So thank y'all. Listen, I told y'all take notes. Classes in session. Okay. My next question is for you, Nadege. Nadege, Miami is often associated with tourism and the nightlife aesthetic. However, beyond the veneer of an inclusive tourist sector, Black communities have a long, vibrant history of not only sharing the culture and social politics of the city, or shaping, the culture and social politics of the city, but resisting violence, segregation, gentrification, and residential pushout. Black women, of course, have been key leaders in this resistance, especially in the context of combating racism and disparities in public health and anti-LGBTQ plus discrimination. Can you speak to your archival research on Black women as public health leaders in Miami, Florida, and how their legacies live on in the form of local community health clinics? Also, I would love for you to talk about your 2023 exhibition you created, Give Them Their Flowers, which was Miami's first exhibit showcasing the city's Black LGBTQ plus history.
So first, I just want to say shout out to Black queer folks, because we doing this work in the memory space, okay? Um, and Black queer folks are dope. So this is what we do. This is what we know. It is why in most traditions, Black queer folks are considered spiritualists. They're considered seers. I'm of Haitian descent, and if you look in the Vodou tradition, so much queer, powerful storytellers. So just want to name that. Um, being from Miami and being raised here, it's so funny when you leave Miami or just when people are visiting, they think it's all sun, fun, and beaches, and it is, right? But I'm like, every time you're in our waters, you're getting a baptism and you don't even know it, right? Because that Blackness is rooted here. And the stories that Miami tells about itself are not Black, even though this is a very Black space. And so one of the things I try to answer for, and I think many of us on this call try to answer for, are the silences, right? And there is something about naming things, because all over Miami, there are things named after Black people. But without the context, the thing that I question is this an honor or is it an epitaph? Because if you don't know what this means, well, what does the honor mean then, right? Is it not a living graveyard? And so my work around, which I wrote for Black women radicals, on Black women healthcare workers, especially pre-1960s, is rooted in the fact that one of our premier health systems here is named after a Black woman. But if you ask most people who Jessie Trice was, they might tell you Jessie Trice, first of all, is a man. Right. They didn't know who she was, even though that's where their kids go to the dentist for free 99 or close to free. And these are mostly Black kids who are in this space, and they don't know that this entire federally qualified health clinic that touches Black Miami to Hispanic Miami is rooted in the work of a Black woman healthcare worker who is now an ancestor. And so part of what I insist on is that you don't just see the names and maybe move on, but to really think about, like, what do these names mean, right? And so that is the work around, like, Black healthcare workers, Black midwives, pre-1940s Miami, and the work of Black midwifery, the work of Black women in keeping children alive across all races, right? Uh, During the 1918 flu pandemic in Miami, one of my favorite things, because Miami is both a very African American and Caribbeanized space, right? And so you get the root work, you get the voodoo, you get the santeria, you get all the layers of us. And during the 1918 flu pandemic, Black women wore protective satchels, right? Made out of their protective things to protect themselves. And many of them were not getting sick. And so the white families they worked for were like, how do we get one of these? And they're like, do you got a praying grandma who's Black? Does she know what to say? Can she pray for the thing? Because it's not just about the thing around your neck. It's, do you know the thing behind the thing? Right. And so the layers of that, right, in wellness and healing. I'm currently right now working, if any of y'all are in Miami for Art Basel, come say hi. I'm working on an installation on Black washerwomen in early 1900s Miami. And the same thing, right? These domestic workers are the invisibilized people, right? If you come to Miami, it's a time, but you're not having a time if the housekeeper is not cleaning your room. you are not having a time if your bed sheets are not being cleaned. And so some of the early pioneers of Miami were Black women. One of the Black Miami pioneers is Florence Gaskins, who moved to Miami in 1894 from Jacksonville. And she founded what would become the first Black employment service for washerwomen, because Black women were the laundromat, right? And so I insist on finding them and naming them and for you to see them, right? Because there's so much in Miami that is invisibilized underneath the veneer of marketing and tourism, because white terrorism does not draw people in, right? And so there's this cover, and many of you on the call may have heard like conversations around, oh, Miami is not the South. It's like not even part of America. That is Black erasure. Because not only is this the South, this is the deep South. It's about as deep as you can get before you land in Cuba. And so when we talk about the stories we tell about Miami, people are like, oh, this ain't Mississippi, this ain't Alabama. I'm like, well, they have Black history museums. Where's Miami's? Not a one. And so the work that I'm doing, especially around Black women and Black women's existence in Miami and Black women in Miami's history as resistors, right, is to see them, to name them, to go through hundreds of pages to get a first name and a last name to be like, we were here, and not just to squint in like a 1906 postcard, which is part of my collection, where the invitation to come to Miami is welcome to Darky Town. And it is the oldest postcard that exists of Black people in Miami, right? And so to give them their flowers, to transition in 2020 at the height of the pandemic, right? Because it's a pandemic, we should start new projects. One of my good friends, Corey, who is the founder of a dope Black queer collective here in Miami called Maven Leadership Collective, he actually, like, we teamed up to do like a little series on like Black queer artists who visited Miami, because Miami was considered the Harlem of the South. And still today, like every artist comes through Miami. This is an important site for music. And what left me wanting after that series on like the Black queer folks who were here, Sister Rosetta Tharpe, Josephine Baker, who desegregated Miami Beach in 1951, bisexual icon, right? Was, okay, I know the celebrities who were here, but I was like, what are those interior stories that we don't see, right? Because I know Black queer folks were here. I'm here. I grew up in Black Miami. I saw all of our Black queer folks. And so I was like, well, who are the Black queer folks in history we weren't seeing? And so Give Them Their Flowers was a correction to the historical record, because so much of Miami's queer history is white. The white is silent. It just says Miami queer history. But you kind of have to squint to see like a Black drag queen on Miami Beach in those photos. And in the writing of Black queerness in Miami, it's certainly not Black. And it's certainly not saying who they were, right? And so this was to answer to that. And so I spent 2 years doing oral histories with Black queer folks in Miami, 45 and over. Our oldest participant was 69 years old. And that culminated, and we also had like, I commissioned local photographers, Black photographers from Miami to take photos of everyone who participated, and that culminated in a beautiful exhibit called Give Them Their Flowers, an exhibit at Black LGBTQ plus Miami. And it was the first time in 2023 in Miami's history that there was a historical exhibit on Black queer Miami, right? And anytime I'm creating something, I'm always thinking about like what will be left behind, or like what is the invitation for community to author their own stories, to author their own archive, to contribute to the archive, right? Because there's also privilege in what gets collected, right? Certain people get collected and others end up on eBay for $5.99 or best offer. And so I invited the community to also fill in the blanks where the historical record was silent. And that ended up being a memory book where people were writing in their uncles' names, their favorite DJ's name, Black queer folks who were no longer with us. And the writing in that book, which I am digitizing as we speak, is some of the most beautiful things I had ever seen. And to see like Black folks who are not queer from Miami walk that exhibit space, and to say like, oh, this drag queen was my friend. And also the amount of elders who were at drag shows in the 1960s in Black Miami need to be studied, which is why I did this. But I was just like, one of my favorite friends, B. Hines, who was the first Black woman reporter at the Miami Herald. I remember going to her, I was like, B, you were at these drag shows? And she was like, yeah, B is a church lady. But she was like, that was the norm, like, right? This was entertainment. But she found it to be so not remarkable to even like write down, right? But I was like, no, this is a big deal. I'm like, do you know what this would do for so many Black queer babies to know that the neighborhoods that they grew up in was also spaces of Black queerness, right? Out loud, not silent. And so give them their flowers. And I'm still continuing on like give them their flowers, which is to continue to create these oral histories, to ask for photos and ephemeral items for people to name things, because most of what I'm looking for we're not going to find in newspaper archives. We're not going to find in any books that have been written already. It is like ground level, going to the community, going to the house museums, right? The front porch, the mango tree in the backyard to get this information. And so that was Give Them Their Flowers, and Give Them Their Flowers continues because especially for the Black queer babies, we deserve to be seen and we deserve to know that we were here.
Raven, you're muted.
We did.
Thanks, y'all. I was just saying I'll jump in to support Jamie because I think she was having some service issues. But I wanted to say thank you so much for that, Nadege. I'm with everybody in the chat, feeling the balm of this conversation and just everything that's already been shared. The recovery of history that is actively happening through this moment is so appreciated. So I want to ask the next question to Siddisse. Siddisse, you're doing critical work on Black expressions of gender and sexuality globally. I'm not going to say this as well as Jamie, but Beatrice Nascimento argues that the Maroon, or the Kilombo, has afterlives and iterations of survival and solidarity in Brazil and across the diaspora. As a co-founder of Kiki Archives, how do you see your collective as a contemporary Maroon or Kilombo for Black, queer, transgender, and gender expansive communities in Africa and across the African diaspora? How has your identity as a first-generation Ethiopian American interdisciplinary artist and archivist, born and raised in DC, heightened, stretched, expanded, and even challenged your frame of reference of the possibilities of what Black queer diaspora archives can be? And that brilliant question is, of course, on behalf of Jamie. So
Thank you so much, Raven. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you for the question. Also echoing the immense gratitude that I feel for Nadege, Jatavia, and Aleia for your amazing responses, and I've just been soaking it all in. So thank you. Yeah, so to answer that question, so when creating Kiki Archives, our main imperative, me and Zora, my co-founder, our main imperatives were thinking about how to expand both open access and also to collect and gather information that reflects a part of who we are in the face of consistent violent erasure that Black, queer, and trans people face in both queer archives as a whole and Black archives as a whole, respectively. So in a sense, this is in line with the idea of archives as evidence of existence, but also the hope is to serve as material that can be used to reproduce life worlds through creativity and imagination. There's something to be said about the connections between the digital as a global network and also being connected through both very different, but also in some ways similar experiences throughout the African diaspora and the global South, experiences of colonization, occupation, displacement, and also the psychic and material fragmentation that many of us have endured for generations. And now having the technology of the internet that connects us, even, though this technology was not made for us, we do use and take it up as we live through its time. But through that, having the ability to connect us and connect to each other in so many vast different ways. So I suppose some of the ideation and the method behind a digital archive is what can come from those pathways, like what can sprout from this connectivity that we have, and how can we imagine a path towards rememory that can subvert, as M. Jackie Alexander says, the pain of dismemberment caused by colonization globally. So while in many ways this global connectivity poses its challenges, dangers, and threats, the hope is that Kiki acts as an idea and a world coming out of the hope and the desire to create pathways towards each other. So that is to witness, to reassemble what has been fragmented, not just as people scattered across a vast global diaspora, but as people committed to loving and living in truth always and always despite. Yes, and to answer the second part of the question, I wanted to name that while I use Ethiopian as a shorthand for ease and understanding, I identify as an Oromo person. For those who are unfamiliar, the Oromo people are the largest indigenous nation of people in East Africa, numbering close to 30 million people. And in the late 19th century, they endured violent annexation at the hands of the Ethiopian Empire and continue to experience ongoing repression and have been struggling for liberation ever since. But in doing my own research on Oromo indigenous religion and philosophy, I learned how historically Oromo people have had an incredibly rich oral tradition, and archival memory is housed in human beings through intentional orating sessions used to preserve communal history through memory and through retelling. And in learning about this, it really led me to think about the centrality of the written word and the material record in our Western archival methodologies, and in also some of my own unconscious practices. And in thinking through these oral archival traditions, I came to the realization that embedded within their very usage is the understanding of the subjectivity, the transformation, and the shades of difference in meaning. So embedded within Indigenous knowledge systems that center human memory rather than material is the acknowledgement of the transformation of culture through time and with generations. And embedded within this system is a decentering of an exact, perfect, and true origin as may be seemingly present within the written word. It's full of the interpretations indicative of the life of an idea, the life of a memory, or the history and the life that that memory has lived. So embedded within it is its own layered meaning. And that's kind of made me rethink the flow of time through history as an evolution and a transformation. It's a story, a tapestry, a web. So I've been contending with and thinking through ways to sensibly integrate systems like this into our wider archival ethos. How to not do away with the strategies we have, but to blend and to integrate other ones, and to rethink how we think about communal memory and how, as a process, this can be its own process of remembering. Yeah, and then I also wanted to add that when I think of like Marronage and Maroon societies, I think about the blending of knowledge systems, the act of using what you have and what you know and building on what was left or what you can retrieve. It's a very cross-geographic, cross-diasporic legacy, and how it's enacted also transforms. So sometimes I wrestle with and wonder if there's value in creating a globalized network with so many varied cultures and lived realities. And while it can pose its many questions and its own challenges, it also opens up an opportunity, a unique opportunity, I think. Opportunity for solidarity, for better understanding of the globalized system of empire, but most importantly to me, a deeper understanding of our interconnectedness. So yeah, that's kind of how I see Black feminist and maroon strategies come up for me. And in the pursuit of being able to, that's kind of in the pursuit of being able to internally move closer to one another. Yeah, that's what I have. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. And shout out to, I'm sorry, Siddisse, I missed your beautiful response, part of it. And shout out to Raven for holding it down because the internet just wild. But I wanted to just say, having interfaced with you, Siddisse, before, I'm always enthralled by your work, how you have always been community centered. And so thank you for the work that you do. And you still owe me a teaching. Okay, another one if you want to. Okay, I haven't forgotten you. Okay. But thank y'all so much for your responses. And also Nadege, I already know your response was also equally excellent. And I'm thank you again for partnering BWR about Black women at the vanguard of public health. And having visited Miami for the first time a couple of months ago, and we missed each other. I'm so sorry. It's so interesting to see that even in 2025, this aesthetic still lives on, whereas Black people are not site builders, world builders of Miami and beyond. So thank you for doing that work. So our last question, and this is for everyone. I'm, to be honest, really reckoning with our future. And we see the dismantling of knowledge production about ourselves, whether that's the form of Black studies, LGBTQ studies, et cetera, at institutional levels, at other levels. Our Supreme Court just gave license to ICE to profile people, and we see all these things happening. And I'm concerned about where do we go from here? And so my question for y'all are, what are your hopes, dreams, and imaginations about the future of our archives and the preservation of ourselves in wake of genocide, environmental crises, fascism, etc.? I know, I'm sorry I asked a huge question. Forgive me, Lord. I'm sorry, but I have to get this knowledge. It's been really bothering me as someone who teaches at a university to see what is happening and to see what's happening in our community and the world. And so I just want to know
Yeah.
y'all's thoughts.
I guess I can start, and I'm still working through this, but I do think that it's an imperative that we disentangle our histories and ways of knowing from institutions. We have to be stewards of our own history, and I'd love to see that as autonomous networks. Um, there's so many ways that museums and archives have been collecting Black history, especially early on during diversity initiatives, like during the early aughts to the 2020s. And a lot of that material is just sitting in the basement. They have not even shown that material. It's not, it doesn't have provenance. It's just sitting in the basement. And it loses its power. It loses its spiritual, psychic, emotional power. But when our histories are in their proper context, which might be our homes, it might be community center, we actually do understand the context of what it is. So I do just really want us to think about the ways that museums and archives are really about accumulating instead of interpreting a history that is useful to us. Um, and I think it'll take a lot longer for us to walk through like what does that actually look like, making sure because there is a reason why people donate their stuff to archives and museums. They have the resources to have climate controlled stuff. They have the right shelving and things like that. But we do have to give more thought to how can we preserve what we have, and then also I think the last thing I'll say is just being attuned to the immaterial things. Like, ask your grandmother for that recipe, ask your grandmother for that prayer. Um, those are the things that we need to remember and continue to pass down. So those are incomplete thoughts, but I just wanted to share that.
That was really beautiful. Ask your grandmother about that recipe and the prayer. That, yes, thank you for that, Dr. Brown. That means a lot. That is an archive. Anyone else want to share?
I'll share two book readings that I think speak to these times. One that I've absolutely loved and is all marked up and crazy now is Scattered and Fugitive Things by Laura Helton. And also The Revolution Will Not Be Funded. Uh, and I think the two things go together because the nonprofit industrial complex is being used very quickly as a way to erase us, right? Because funders are scared. And so when funders are scared, they don't fund this work. Or if you get federal dollars, as we have seen, federal dollars are, people are losing $600,000 plus at a time right now. And so I also think about like, well, before all of this, right? Before the nonprofit industrial complex, we have always done this, right? I think there are some things that if you are called to do it, you're called to do it, you're called to do it. Doesn't matter what happens, you're going to do it. Before the Schomburg was part of the New York Public Library system, it was a salon. It was a private residence, right? And so I think there's a going back to what does it mean to just hold space on your own? I think there is a necessity to make things fugitive in creative ways. It might look like an art installation. It might look like a song. It might look like a recipe, right? When I think about Miami's Black history, even if you erased every book that did exist, and there aren't that many about Miami's Black history to begin with, um, you know the history through the food, right? Like Miami is probably one of the only places where you can go to a soul food restaurant and find conch. And people are like, conch is not African American, right? It's Bahamian. But because Bahamians in Miami were commingling in the late 1800s, early 1900s to found this city, our foodways here, when we say soul food, you will get like smothered pork chops and collard greens, but that restaurant likely has conch salad, right? And so I think the creativity that Jatovia talked about, right? Like the necessity of creativity as liberation is going to have to serve us in very meaningful ways, as it always has, right? But like that re-remembering that Siddisse talks about, that going back to our indigenous knowledge, right? Our plant medicine teaches us something, that there are archives in our movement. When we see Revelations by Alvin Ailey, and I'm a retired dancer, but my first art form was the performing arts. It was dance. Alvin Ailey said dance is for the people and should be given back to the people, right? Because the body is an archive. If you have no point of reference to modern dance, right? Technical modern dance. If you see Revelations, you see church. You're like, this is movements of the church, right? And it's familiar. And so I think going back to the things that are familiar and weaving those familiar things into the things that we do is has always been necessary, and I think is urgently necessary now.
Thank you so much, Nadege. That was beautiful too. Oh yes, Jatavia. I'm sorry.
Sorry, so you say if you want to go, you can. Okay. I've been obsessing over political education. A part of me, I just be scrolling online and I'm like, damn, we cooked, because we don't know anything anymore. We do know things, and I have to bring myself back from the edge. But I think, and this echoes what Dr. Brown and what Nadege were talking about, is this kind of, we have to build these things for ourselves, right? And I'm speaking as someone who is collected by museum, who's very like political insurgent work, has gone into a museum and then been blanketed and put into a cute little corner, right? So I understand and I know from what I speak, right? what I'm saying about political education is our means for navigating the very real danger is one of those things is education. And we cannot allow, just like we cannot allow institutions to steward our histories and our memories, we cannot allow institutions to be responsible for what we know, right? I believe it was Asada who said something about, you know, no oppressor is going to allow you to, you know, think your way or to, you know, they're not gonna, I'm fucking up the quote, but you're not gonna be able to be educated towards your freedom. No oppressor is going to allow that. So we are responsible, right? And so for me, what I imagine, what I prefigure are autonomous ways of learning, autonomous ways of sharing education, and whether that's networked or whether that's, you know, in small spaces in our homes, or whether that's reading groups online, or whether that's what we're doing right now, it has to be for us, by us. It has to be from our own hands. We have to be the ones saying, this is the information and passing that down to the young people. I can't tell you how many times I'm like talking to somebody who's like born in 2000 and they're like, what? I've never heard of that. And I'm like, you've never heard of that? And then I have to say, well, how would they, like, it's my job to tell you, right? Like I used to have a teacher, amazing teacher, who would say, y'all don't know who Pearl Primus is? And we're like, girl, you the teacher? Teacher, you know what I'm saying? And so that is what I think, you know, it's our responsibility, right? We can't just say, oh, you know, the kids don't know nothing nowadays. Gen Z, they don't really, I don't know what to say about these kids. And, you know, the YNs are doing this and that. We are each other's benefit and bond. I'm fucking up a Gwendolyn Brooks quote, you know what I'm saying? So like, you know, we are each other's magnitude. We are each other's responsibility. So I feel like for me, it's the archive, it's the creativity, it's the education, right? And those are all bound up and inextricably linked together. You feel what I'm saying? For the past 10 years, not even 10 years, going on 12, 13, I'm not even supposed to be talking about this thing, but I'm gonna tell you right now, I have been interviewing various family members. I think Aleia said, go ask your grandmama about the recipe, or go ask, no, sit her down and press record and just start talking. Ask her about everything. Ask her about everything. Whatever she wants to tell you, listen, right? Maybe she has some pictures. Maybe she has a roll of Super 8 that she recorded, right? I have a great auntie who does. She has 7 rolls of Super 8. So I got on my knees and I gave thanks, right, to the Most High, because that's gold. That's like currency. You feel what I'm saying? That is a testament to us having been here and still being here. So I think we have to have the capacity to teach ourselves and to teach our progeny. And we also have to be the timekeepers, the memory keepers for our own reality. Because when it's in the hands of the institution, and I'm speaking from experience, when it's in the hands of the institutions, becomes declawed. It is removed from source. It is removed from context, as someone said earlier, and its power is diminished. And we don't want that. We need full power. We need to power up right now, like in a very real way, on all cylinders. That's all I'm gonna say. It's been beautiful.
No, thank you, Jatavi, and thank you all for your responses, because it really, you start to think about how, even in the process of, you know, working with these institutions, what is the cost of pacification and co-optation to our memories, to ourselves, to our future? And so I'm always constantly thinking about that. Thank you, as someone who works in these institutions. So thank you all, Dr. Brown, Nadege, Tavi, and last but not least, Siddisse. I would love to hear your thoughts on the future of the archive.
Sure. Honestly, everyone has said it pretty much. And I'm so grateful for that. Even when you were just speaking, Jamie, not only like what is the cost in that way, but what is the cost psychically? What is the cost and the limitation to our imagination? I even think about how unfortunate it is how little we're able to see beyond it. And yeah, I don't know. I really have always been very pro DIY, very pro do this yourself, guerrilla style, don't wait for anybody. So in that same vein, we have our communities and we have things that hold memory. And like Jatavia said, we are the ones who will pass it forward. We are the ones we have to take up those responsibilities too. In a lot of ways, we haven't had to, or the culture that we live in has made it so that we don't need to focus on the importance of orating our histories to each other, on telling each other where, where we are. The story, I really truly believe that stories are pathways. They're really like doors. And they they hold so much, right? They're just passages. So yeah, I really believe that we can create communal strategies together. We just have to truly think beyond other people holding it for us. We have to be the ones to hold it. And I also just like as a last note, I really think and urge people to read about Indigenous archives that have existed. We have held memory before this empire. We have held our own memories before this empire, and we will continue to beyond it. It's crumbling, so we will continue to beyond it. This book that I've been reading, it's called Indigenous Archives in Post-Colonial oh, I can't see it. It's called Indigenous Archives in Post-Colonial Contexts, Recalling the Past in Africa. It was published in 2024. It speaks on how to integrate Indigenous archives with contemporary archives. Specifically, the authors are from South Africa and Zimbabwe, respectively, and they talk about the different Indigenous archival practices, how murals were a part of their archival practices because they're outside and they're seen by everybody, so they're a part of public memory, right? How naming practices were a part, how they could trace back their lineage generations just through naming practices. And just these are just some of the ways that can help us imagine that we are, as human history, we outlive this white supremacist empire, and we will continue to, and we don't have to be limited in our ideation of what can happen and what can exist. So I really just encourage people to just read more about the ways that Indigenous people still to this day across the world are continuing to hold their memories, even if they have to go underground, even if they have to hide. You know what I mean? People are doing it, and we can do it too, no matter what. So yeah, that's what I have to say.
I just want to say thank you for that, Siddisse, about the imagination, because I'm gonna be quite frank, seeing what I've been seeing with the genocide that's happening in Palestine, Sudan, what happened in Nepal recently, and Indonesia, I like my mind, like I've been having a hard time. Like, can I imagine a world outside of this? This is me being completely frank. And I know about Marronage, Marronage, whatever people want to call it. I've read it, and I still am so dismayed by our world. But you saying that reminds me of Sarah Bradford's biography of Harriet Tubman, and she talks about she would dream of her freedom and she would fly like a bird. And then when she felt like she wasn't going to fly anymore, there were women wearing white pulling her to cross over. And so I am taking what you said with me, and also what everyone has said, Nadege, Jatavia, Dr. Brown, about imagining a world outside of our own, and that we are in the future. And so I wholeheartedly thank you for that. You're about to make me cry. Thank you so much for that. It really means a lot. Does anyone else want to have any other thoughts before we get to questions? Feel free to use the Q&A section
I
or
have
bottom at the bottom. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Brown.
I do have a quick thought, and Jatavia, is just something that you said about teaching. It's so important. I'm teaching in the classroom and beyond, but I have had students that do not believe in the Atlantic slave trade. That's where we are right now. And it's heartbreaking. So I just wanted to mention that this is the time that we're on, and that's why teaching is so important. And yes, someone said that's dark. Yes, it is the most bereft, dark place to hear that Black students do not believe in the Atlantic slave trade. But it speaks to how important teaching is right now. And it also speaks to the disruption of history and memory and where the deep, dark place that it takes us when that happens. So I just wanted to mention that it's been on my heart. It's a morning spot for me, but yeah, we have an incredible responsibility to teach.
Ooh, thank you for that, Dr. Brown. And Nadege, I saw you had your hand up.
One quick thing I wanted to add is print things. I think we are actively participating in our own erasure when people like us in 30 years, 40 years, 70 years go to look for us. Will they find us? And the answer to that will likely be no if everything we make is digital, right? The digital space is actively erasing us. I think the most precious things I found are staple bound, right? Staples will last 100 years, right? But Instagram might not last 15. And so just think about all of the work and labor that goes into your lecture series, into all of the dope stuff that you're making. If none of this stuff is ever printed out, like what I have done is for every lecture series I do, I create an ephemeral item. So whether it's a flyer, a bifold pamphlet, or a zine, there is an ephemeral item so that someone's grandchildren will find it on their bookshelf or in their papers before they throw it out. I'm also creating like archival boxes for everything I print out every year. And then like, mass sending that out to institutions and people that I know like to keep things, right? But I just think that we are not making ephemera, we are not making tangible things, and we are spending a lot of money, a lot of labor, and a lot of time around the things that we are creating, and everything we make is not a manuscript. So few of us actually get to create manuscripts. And so it's just a call to action on printing things and disseminating those things in creative ways. Otherwise, we will be lost to history.
Thank you so much for that. Jatavi, did you have something to say? I just wanted
Yeah,
to.
just really quickly, I want to echo that from Nadege, and this includes big and small things, right? Like I remember growing up with the family photo album, right? This kind of large, it's got the plastic that you can pull over. Ours was really sacred because it had obituaries in it. There was also the family Bible that had all of this stuff in it, maybe even birth certificates and social security cards. You know how old folks are, they'll just like keep everything there. But like, as a filmmaker, one of my goals, who's somebody who has made digital films, but who also has a 16 millimeter, super 8 millimeter practice that is digitized, right? And then woven into the digital, is to then work backward, right? To have these films printed, right? Make a 35 millimeter print of your films, right? If you're working in the digital space, if you're making films, I know this is expensive, but for me, it is a huge goal, right? There have been so many lost films that are recovered, and it was recovered how? Because there was a print of it, not because there was a dusty hard drive that is now corrupted and we can't access it. It was a physical piece of something, right? It lived in the physical realm, right? So for me, having to like understanding that we live right now, but there is a such thing as a future, and there will be a relic. What will you leave behind?
Thank you all for that. That means so much, especially doing the work digitally and online. I think about what Crew Make Do said, founder of Black Lesbian Archive, said when whoever the powers that be, take down the internet, what will we have? And she responded, we will need each other. And so I think that's so important to print, to uh, build community in this way as a form of archive, and to acknowledge what Dr. Brown said. We are definitely in dark times where you have so much disinformation and misinformation spreading on social media that we can see the comments, there's disbelief that from Black youth that the transatlantic slave trade happened. And so we do have a lot of work to do, and I'm ready to continue it because we got to do something. But I want to thank you all for being examples, shining examples of doing the work, of being committed to the work. I'm inspired by each and every one of you. And I feel like, and I know that you represent the afterlives and iterations of the Maroon and feminist abscondents. So I appreciate you all so much. And to our audience members, please note that this panel is being recorded and will be uploaded on YouTube. And so you'll have all this knowledge to access and refer back to as well. Now, even though I did say that we had time for Q&A, we actually kind of don't. I'm so sorry, y'all. Please don't hurt me. I really the hour and a half went by so fast, y'all. Please. And so I will take these questions and share them with with our panelists if they so choose to respond to them. But I'm really sorry, y'all, we cannot um, have a Q&A like I thought we would. And so Raven's back on the call because we want to unveil the Nannie Helen Burroughs monument that BWR and Kinfolk Tech collaborated on. And also, yes, there will be a part 2, y'all. That's gonna come. So please don't hurt the messenger. Okay.
Yes, I just want to say thank you all again. I've just been in the background going, like over and over again. And so every word was felt. I feel it in the chat. Also, we were all in community. And I think, yeah, there's just so much depth that we all can sit with from this conversation and real strategies and tools to pull from this conversation that I'm so excited to implement in my own personal life and practice. And so we wanted to take some time for those who can stay on with us and showcase the beautiful monument to Nannie Helen Burroughs that we created in collaboration with Jamie and Black Women Radicals. So we have a little deck that we can pull up some slides just to help you access it and give you an opportunity. Just to give you a little context, if you're familiar with like Pokemon Go, Kinfolk Tech uses similar technology. And instead of chasing Pokemon through your phone, you're able to access our histories. And so we're creating a mobile living archive, and we work often with artists and grassroots organizations to tell our stories. We can move forward here. Let's see. Yeah, we can skip that too. Let's get to the juicy stuff. There we go. Okay, so just a little bit, and maybe Jamie, do you want to say anything about why you chose Nannie Helen Burroughs to commemorate?
Yes, thank you for that. I think all the panelists emphasized political education, but I think it was Jatavia who mentioned it. I chose Nannie Helen Burroughs because, as I said, she was well, first she was hailed as the world's most scintillating Negro woman leader, and she founded the National Training School for Women and Girls at a time where she went to M Street High School, which was the first high school for African Americans in the United States, in the nation. But she was expected to have a job at M Street, but she was discriminated against her color because she was a dark-skinned Black woman. So she, at that moment in time, said, I'm going to create a school for Black women and girls. And it doesn't matter what shade they are, everyone is welcome. It doesn't even matter what background they are, everyone is welcome. And so she created the National Training School for Women and Girls, which was the first American institution to offer a combination of academic training, religious study, domestic science, and vocational instruction within a single educational space. And so that's why I chose Nannie Helen Burroughs, because Black men radicals, we are fundraising to open a physical school for the physical location, a brick and mortar for the School for Black Feminist Politics in the DC area. And so in terms of political education, as someone who works at a university, I know that the university will not save us, and we really need this space to continue to learn about ourselves. And so that's why I chose Nannie Helen Burroughs. And this is her, Nannie Helen Burroughs, right in front of the Nannie Helen Burroughs School in DC.
Thank you, Jamie. Yes. So this is the culmination of the reference materials that Jamie pulled from and our creative team used to design this augmented reality monument. So you can see some of the elements that inspired this piece, and we can send this along with the recording to everybody who registered for today's event. Let's go to the next slide, please. Beautiful. So there's a QR code here. If you're new to this, you can go ahead and scan this using your phone's camera to pull up a way to access the Kinfolk app. And if you already have our app, you might need to just do a little update since we added this monument. So I'll give folks a moment. And feel free to let us know if you're having any trouble in the chat. Awesome. Okay, I see some no trouble. Okay, beautiful. So yeah, as you can see, the Kinfolk app is free and available for folks to download if you have Apple iOS or Android. And we have a series of monuments that we've created with collaborators. And so if we want to go to the next slide. Oh, okay, my bad. You can actually go into the monument gallery. And so you should be able to either search by the list or scroll through the the gallery of monuments and find Nannie Helen Burroughs. And so there's a little icon on the right side that lets you download it. This is just downloading inside of the app. And then it'll ask you to find a place to put it in your location near you. So you just have to tilt your phone to find a place to place it into your home.
Perfect. Yeah, please everyone download it. I also wanted to shout out to the Kinfolk Tech team for their amazing work.
Yes, and so yeah, there's archival material that lives alongside of that monument. So when you tap it, you can walk around it. You can read more about Nannie Helen Burroughs and her impact. So just wanted to shout that out in honor of this conversation and the themes that we're celebrating alongside Black women radicals. If you want to go to the next slide, we do have just a little bit of a survey feedback form. Would love to hear what folks thought about this particular conversation and panel. But yes, I just want to shout out the ASL interpreters as well, and Jamie for being an amazing collaborator for both this panel and conversation as well as the monument. And so really excited for people to experience it and hopefully be able to share that knowledge with other folks.
Thank you so much, Raven. Before I say my final words to our amazing panelists, Adele, if you didn't mind going to the next slide, to please donate to the fundraiser to open a brick and mortar for the School for Black Feminist Politics. I can't wait till it comes into fruition, and we're not going to let white supremacist fascists scare us from doing the work about learning about ourselves. So I appreciate you all. To Siddisse, to Dr. Brown, to Jatavia, to Nadege, thank you for being bombs and sages for tonight. I've learned so much from y'all. An honor to collaborate and work with y'all and to listen to you all, and for being actually feeding my fangirl and my nerdiness about Black feminists, fugitivity. Once again, I want to shout out to Raven, Layla, Dele, Dave, Micah, Asia. I hope I'm not forgetting anyone. Idris, who I believe is the founder of Kinfolk Tech. We've never met before, but thank you so much. I want to shout out to amazing ASL interpreters and to the Black feminist Maroon leaders before us who are guiding lights for us now. And so thank y'all for joining us. And I'm looking forward to seeing y'all for the next panel. So be on the lookout for that. So I hope y'all have a great night. And we did it on time, y'all. No CP time. We didn't go over the time. Okay, okay, okay. No got a man time, no CP time. Okay. Thank y'all so much. Siddisse, Nadege, Jatavia, Dr. Brown. Shout out to y'all. Okay, y'all. Have a good night.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.